Between the years 2006 and 2010, there were 975 people in the state of Victoria under the care of the mental health system who have died unnatural, unexpected and violent deaths. If that happened anywhere else in our lives, I think there'd be a scream of protest. What is going on here? They're starting to a voice is starting to come out, but it's still too tiny. Victoria has the highest use of forced community psychiatric treatment in the world. 5,400 people subject to CTOs in a year, greater than the number of prisoners, which is around about 4,300. This is unbelievable that this is going on. What does all this mean? Forced community psychiatric treatment. And I emphasise the word forced because that's where my sister was situated for many, many years. When you're on a CTO in the state of Victoria, you have restrictions put on your personal rights to liberty, to be free of cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment, and to be free of experimentation. Unfortunately, those restrictions those freedoms are taken away from you. So there must be some pretty severe reasons why you would be put on a CTO, you would think. Let's have another look at the conflict of interest that psychiatrists have got, because they're the authorised professionals who can put someone on a CTO and also are responsible for that same person for their mental health care and treatment. That sounds very, very dangerous territory. So we need to have a hard look at that. Also, let's talk about electric shock treatment. In the state of Victoria, again, it's not subject to prior or authorisation by an independent tribunal or another decision maker. And my sister again has had forced shock treatment against her will. In 2007, about 620 people in the state were involuntary beneficiaries of 6,300 shock treatments. It's about 10 per person. So who is safeguarding the rights of these people? Now, the reason therefore that I emphasise is that every day lives are at stake, and these are some of the most disadvantaged people in our community, and a lot of them don't have anyone to look after them. And a lot of this is happening behind closed doors in psych wards. And I'm doing a quick interview with Cheryl in regards to her time spent in the Victorian mental health system as an involuntary patient under what is called a CTO, or Community Treatment Order. Hi Cheryl.
Hi Gary.
Tell us something about how you started off getting involved in the mental health system.
Yes, it was about 21 years ago now. Following the tragedy of our younger brother in 1983, I began to receive what I believe are messages from my dead brother. And on this particular day, I visited my mother's home and gave to her a message from Ray, one of love and reassurance, and her being like she is, she was concerned about me, so she rang a doctor to give me a Valium injection. And when he arrived, I refused it. He sent back, after he left, the CAT team and the police. I didn't know the CAT team existed in those days. I've had a lot of run-ins with them since. And they, after talking to my mother for a while, in my absence, decided that I should see a psychiatrist to reassure my family that I was all right. I now know it was a trick, and they had me incarcerated in the Footscray Psychiatric Hospital that night, and I was there for a month.
So these days, people who bring messages from the dead can be considered psychic mediums, yes. And they can charge a lot of money, and people think that that's okay. Mm-hmm. This has happened to you, and suddenly you've got a mental illness or something.
Schizophrenic, yes.
And so what happened? You were medicated?
I was medicated and when we're first incarcerated, the medication is quite horrific. It's in large doses and it completely disables you, and whether you were sane or not beforehand, you certainly don't look like you're too sane the next morning when you're being interviewed by a psychiatrist.
So over the years you've been labelled with various mental illnesses. What are some of them?
Oh, personality disorder, schizophrenia, and I forget the others.
And so in terms of having a label called schizophrenia, did anyone explain to you what that meant?
No, never.
Right. And over the years you've had different doctors treating you and very much forced into taking certain medication. Were you ever told what the pros and cons of the medication was? Whether it was going to harm you or not? What side effects there were going to be, but possibly, etc., etc.?
No, I was never told about the side effects. I just experienced them. And later I was questioned by psychiatrists about them. I don't know why, because when given the side effects, they didn't change the medication at all. They seemed quite happy to go on as they were going and let things be.
So what are some of these side effects, Cheryl?
Well, the main one is obesity. Eye and fluid retention. The medication gives you a voracious appetite and you eat everything in sight, and you become a full-blown obese person.
And what else?
Well, it affects the heart, the lungs. It feels like you're in a straitjacket. You're wearing a straitjacket, and it suppresses the lungs terribly. So
you have trouble breathing, in other words?
You cannot think. So it's like having a chemical lobotomy, and there's no way you can sound reasonable or sane to anybody while you're on that medication.
So your quality of life is pretty well zilch.
It's worse than that. It's something you're always hoping you're going to work your way out of it, but you know that if it remains the way it is, that you'd rather not be around at all rather than enduring the side effects that you put out with.
Did your doctors ever give you any other form of treatment or hope that in fact there will come a day when you're off the medication, or they're planning for you to be off the medication and have other forms of treatment?
Never. No, they were only too ready to tell me that I was a schizophrenic and that I'd be on medication for life. And
so a death sentence, in other words?
A death sentence, yes. And that our life expectancy was less than other people. But apparently we were supposed to be grateful for that. One psychiatrist told me that I was lucky because if it had been 100 years ago, somebody like myself would be in chains underground.
So, in terms of what the doctors said, the treatment and so on, what's one of the worst things that's happened to you?
It happened several times, having my door taken off after refusing medication by police and escorted to a delivery van and taken to a nearby psychiatric hospital. Yes, actually the door here at this address that I'm at now has been removed several times to have me incarcerated in psychiatric hospitals, and on arrival I've been put into isolation and manhandled by both men and women, white coats, and stripped naked and given injections and left to myself for 24-hour periods.
Goodness me. So how did you feel? What was going through?
Terrified. There was nobody.
What about the nurses?
To reach out to.
The nurses, Cheryl, on the wards. How did they help you or treat you or support you?
They were as bad as psychiatrists. They seemed quite happy with their jobs and were only too ready and willing to give us involuntary medication if we didn't accept medication orally from them.
So they would probably say they're just doing their job?
Just doing their job, yes. And they believe wholeheartedly in it.
Now, we were able to get you off this community treatment order 6 or so months ago. You've still got a problem with the medication because you can't just stop the medication. So we've got to get support to help you withdraw very gradually over time. So that must be a challenge and a trial as well for you.
Yes, but I'm very happy to be off depot injections and on oral medication now. And I'm not biting at the bit to get off the oral medication. It is a lot better, as I said. And the psychiatrist who's treating me now is ready and willing to help me come off the oral medication in time. It might take a period of 12 months or 2 years.
So you've found a psychiatrist, a private one, Cheryl?
Yes.
Who is treating you in a different way? I mean, as a person?
As a person, he's humane and doesn't believe all that much in medication, not to the extent of the treating doctors that I've been under before.
So is that one of the secrets or solutions or ways to improve the system, to actually have psychiatrists understand that it's not just about medication, that it's about the person?
Yes.
And having compassion and care for them? What are your words around that?
I don't believe in forced involuntary medication, but I believe if a person wishes to take medication, they should be available to them. Personally, I wouldn't take it, and I believe in talk therapy, which is something that I was never given.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and
Thank you.
good luck on your continued
Journey.